really, really, really pleased to introduce to you Ashley Schoberg. Did who came to the M Factor watch party? Carrie, you did. Okay. Um, Ashley was one of our panel speakers, and I was introduced to her uh through Lori Chaffardoni, who was also on the panel, um, as someone who's a really dynamic expert and someone who can be really helpful in terms of mindset, exercise physiology, and um, it's really perfect that she's joining us now because she does have a lot of wisdom to offer in terms of, this idea of body as temple. What are we going to fill it with, and how are we going to utilize it to continue to be in a place to celebrate in our 60s, 70s, 80s. I'm in the 60s range right now. So thank you, Ashley, and I will let you take it from here.
Perfect. Hey, everybody. So I'm just going to start by saying that I love to have back and forth conversations. I love to hear what your questions are. But first of all, I have been listening for the last 30 minutes, and I feel like there's so much that I can say and that we can talk about, and so many different angles that we can come from. Because yes, my background is a master's degree in exercise physiology. I am a behavior change specialist, nutrition related stuff, all kinds of stuff. And then I've worked with women for the longest time. My studio was specific to women. My new online group that I'm starting is exclusive to women. And a big part of that has really been kind of what you were talking about before, is the spirituality piece around movement, but then also the body image part, kind of like where this culture has taught women to have their worth on their body, and like learning how to transcend that. And in my experience and working with the women that I've worked with, that has really been a key piece to help them evolve spiritually, is learning how to do that, because that is really what has held even myself. Oh my gosh, I struggled with this massively earlier in my life. So I want to hear from Lauren, I suppose. Where do you want this conversation to go? Because I feel like we could take it in 1,000 different directions. What did you have in mind?
Well, I think that what you just said is, and I wrote it down. I've already taken a bunch of notes.
Oh, awesome.
Transcending, that the message that we receive that our body shape or our, is our worth.
Right.
And how that um is so insidious,
Mhm.
and it's something that we feel less and less in control of as we get older. And that's true for me, for
Mhm.
sure. I'm 61 years old. So many things have shifted, and I've had my existential dread moments, looking in the mirror and crying, and like what, where did you go, that kind of thing. Like, don't stop that. And uh even my daughter saying, Mom, you could get the lip thing. I was like, really, dude?
My daughter is 11, and she said to me a couple of months ago, we were getting ready to go to bed, and I'm just wearing a t-shirt. She's like, "You're really flappy." And she just meant it in the most like, cute way, like my boobs, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
You know?
Charming. Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks,
exactly.
gal.
But she's just
Yeah,
young.
and how do we not like internalize the slings and arrows in that way. But I think, we are working on mindset throughout the whole thing, but maybe to focus on just a few things. What could everybody benefit from in terms of movement methodology, um, uh, and not having anything to do with uh, body shape necessarily. How do we stay strong? How do we stay positive? Yeah.
I'd like
Yeah.
to hear,
Or go ahead, Carrie.
I'd like to hear your input on the absolutely exhausting debate over calories in, calories out being
Oh
like
God. Oh yeah.
this static, simplistic thing. And then all of these lived experiences women have when
Yep.
they reach their late 30s, early
Yeah.
from your perspective?
Yeah. So what I tell people is the calories in, calories out, the law of thermogenics is true, but it doesn't mean what people think it means. People think it means whatever I eat is calories in, right? And then whatever I burn through like movement and metabolic rate is calories out. But it's truly not that simple, as you started to say, right? Because calories in can be affected like by, it's not just what we take in, it's how our body uses what we eat, right? And that can be affected by hormones, by stress, by the type of food it is, by how much muscle we have in our body. So, in a nutshell, calories in versus calories out does not mean really what people think it means. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. Oh, I can't. Oh, she's muted. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, no, it does make
Okay.
sense.
Okay, perfect. So that's how I explain it to people. Calories matter, but it's not just this static equation. And it's also like when if somebody's goal is fat loss, it is not this static equation. It's something you want to take into consideration, but it is really you want to look at the big picture of everything. Like what types of foods are we choosing? How much am I moving? It's not, I do not preach calorie counting at all because it's not a perfect science. Knowing how many calories a food has generally is a good thing to know, just to have an idea of maybe what a portion size is. Even we don't need to be married to that either. But just knowing those things so we have an idea because it's not a perfect science. And really becoming in tune with our body so we can actually feel what that slight caloric deficit is if we are going in that direction. But yeah, so going back to the hormonal piece, that is a lot of times what women start to experience when we go through perimenopause and menopause and those hormonal changes, right? It's like they're like, I'm not doing anything differently, but I have this new fat in my belly area, right? Or more than I used to have. It's just I haven't done anything different. And that's what's happening. It's the hormonal changes. And that's why we want to look at sometimes, are we strength training? Because that helps with how the body uses food for energy. It increases our metabolic rate. And what types of foods are we choosing? Because our bodies do tend to become a little bit more insulin resistant during that time because of the hormones. So starch is not anything we need to be afraid of, but we do become a little bit more sensitive to that in the way of we might not need as much as we used to because our body isn't going to use it in the same way. But again, we can start learning how to feel into that stuff because our body gives us feedback. Because if we're having a lot of that and we don't need it, it can make us tired, cause cravings. So really the meals and the types of food that we pair together, we can feel into how that is making our body feel. Is it sustaining our hunger? Is it giving me energy? Or is it making me want to take a nap? Am I having cravings an hour later? Like all that stuff. I'm kind of getting off onto a tangent, but hopefully that answered your question. And
Yeah.
That was great, Ashley. Do you mind if I ask?
please, I love
So
questions.
I feel like how we approach nutrition in a way that's not going to add to the mental anguish, and how we approach physical exercise in a way that's challenging without overdoing it the way maybe we could get away with more in our 30s.
Yeah. So it's a very layered question. You actually said something I want to address first. You talked about how the intense exercise might not be the best choice for you right now. That's actually something to talk about with menopause in general because of the hormonal changes. Our body is more sensitive to stress. So those exercise programs that may have felt great to us when we were younger don't really feel as good and don't work as well getting us where we want to go because of those hormonal changes sometimes. Now, there's always going to be outliers to that. Are there some women that can do a ton of HIIT and super intense stuff like all the time and it's great? Okay, cool. Yeah. But a lot of times that's not what the perimenopause and menopause metabolism is gonna find. And let's have a little bit of a back and forth conversation about your question as far as making it a positive experience. So with food, because I come from a very similar background. I used to be a binge eater when I was younger, and very much obsessive with the exercise, murdering myself with workouts and finding, wow, this isn't really giving me the return on my investment I think it should. You know what I mean? And then of course learning that. But so the positive relationship with food, one of the things I start with people is really, you kind of hit it on the head, really, the intuitive eating, learning how to listen to your body, and then also really looking at the science side of food, because a lot of women, they want to bring shame into food, the good and the bad and all this stuff. And I'm like, let's put that aside and let's talk about the science of food and really what is going on inside of our body with the foods that we're choosing. And then also learn how to give ourselves grace and not have the good and bad labels. And like, if I want to have a treat, or, if my body is having a craving, how do I allow myself to have some of that without feeling this sense of shame and guilt that we have been conditioned to have go along with that? Am I kind of answering that question for you? Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like me to expand on in there? There's probably so much we could say, but I guess one of the things that happens with the shame is the all or nothing eating. That's very, very common, and something I experienced a lot, and a lot of my clients do or have as well. Yeah, and that really just comes back to the shame and really learning how to create emotional neutrality around food, because it's those emotions, those thoughts of shame that really can drive our relationship with food if that's where we're at with it. So yeah, emotional neutrality is really the biggest thing. Food is not a moral thing. It's not good and bad. And I teach too that food is on a continuum of health, right? Everyone's like, oh, this food's bad and this food's good. But it's like, there's so many different types of food. Some are more healthy and some are less healthy, but that doesn't mean that certain foods can't fit in to our lifestyle. And it's kind of how much are we eating those foods and where are they on that spectrum of health, right? It's not a black or a white thing.
Can
I
you,
think with eating, for me personally, I feel like listening to my body is more clear with food. Could you speak to
Yeah.
exercise and how we can gauge what's enough, what's too much, what's not enough? Like how that feels a little harder from the
yeah, I have a question. I have an interim question before we go to the exercise, Carrie, is the idea of intuitive eating juxtaposed with the guidelines for menopausal women. So there's I don't want to create any conflict or dissonance here, but we know it's scientifically proven that we need to eat more protein,
Yes.
however we get it. And we need to eat more good fiber,
Mhm.
right? And because both of those help to keep the gut-brain connection, everything flowing. It actually helps with the elasticity of our connective tissue, all of these things. So how do we put that together with this idea of um, intuitive eating so that we're up leveling kind of both?
Yeah. Yeah. So what I would say is that's what I teach people. And when I teach mindful and intuitive eating, that it really is that combination of feeling into our body, but also the food science piece of understanding the certain how protein, fiber, and fat and that combination affects our hunger, energy, and cravings, and why protein is important. So really understanding that science of food, right? And then, you know, learning how to do that, pairing, certain foods and things like that, watching how our body responds to it, and then really getting in touch with that. So it's really a combination of the two. It's not one or the other, because mindful and intuitive eating really doesn't work well without the food science, understanding, hey, we do need a certain amount of protein in our meal for us to be satisfied and get rid of that hunger and all that kind of stuff. Because if we don't understand the food science part of protein, fiber, fat, what have you, it turns into, well, I just feel like cupcakes right now or whatever, you know what I mean? It can just turn into that. So that's why those two really need to be paired together. Yeah.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
I've been known to say, like, you know, any food can be health food depending on how and why you eat it. Like, I love French fries, but I eat 4 or 5 and I enjoy the heck out of them, and I get my endorphin hit and it's wonderful, and then that's it. And that, to me, that's health food, because I have a really healthy relationship to that. If I'm just sitting there eating, like, looking sadly at another freaking rice cake, and that causes me stress, you
Yeah.
know, it's like, no, that's a bummer. And so there's that association with eating as deprivation, which you're an expert at. So Yeah. Can you hear what's going on out here? No.
I can.
I have howler monkeys literally.
Do you? I was
Yeah.
wondering if your background is because you were still in Belize or if it was
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Zoom background. Cool, cool. I
Yeah,
love
but
it.
the howler monkeys are yelling like right
Oh my
there. So,
goodness,
okay.
it's so great. I love that.
Sorry to distract, but
No, I
um
it's good.
thank you. Thank you. So are there I wrote down, so we have to pair this food science for this stage of life with intuitive eating.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah. And I what I say is the mindful and intuitive eating, it has the two pieces of the awareness piece, like really tuning in and feeling out how am I feeling? Why am I craving this? What, like that whole thing with the food science. Yes, like those two go hand in hand. Yeah. So going back to Carrie's question about the exercise. So this is a really good question. So I would say when you say what's enough, again, it kind of comes back to those generalized guidelines, kind of like we have with food, right? Like protein, we need enough protein. With this, I would say you want to have a mixture of strength training, some kind of strength training, and some kind of cardiovascular exercise. That's what I would say. And the biggest thing, let's talk about strength training real quick, because for women, especially going through this stage of life, it is key really to be strength training because of the bone loss that can happen as we go through menopause, right? So building that bone from strength training, and then also the muscle too, of course, right? We can lose muscle and how that affects the overall functioning of our body and our quality of life as we age. But really that bone health is truly so important. So to go back to your question, I would say, again, the general guidelines of having those two things in your life. And the biggest thing beyond that is, what do you like? Because people, a lot of times with exercise, always get stuck in, oh, I got to do this exercise or that type exercise, or, oh, I got to do this. And it's like, really, the biggest thing that is going to, the biggest determining factor of whether you are going to be successful long term and stick with it is, do I like it? And that's really what you want to ask yourself. And beyond that, as far as strength training protocols, I mean, I don't know if we could get into that here. Probably not, because that would be more demonstrative and stuff. But Carrie, did I answer your question? Do you have any further questions on that? Oh, she's good.
Okay, I have a question about, you said strength training, absolutely really important for bone health, and then also keeping muscle tone.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
And
to
strength.
extrapolate,
Like this.
yeah, just strength and agility is really important as we age. Our ears get dried out, our balance goes off.
I was just going to say balance. You literally just read my mind. Yeah, and the more strength we have, the better our balance is going to be.
Yeah. And proprioception, right?
Oh, yeah.
But my question was around muscle. Okay. So build, staying strong through the muscles, and because the connective, literally when we lose estrogen in the body, connective tissue uh starts to degrade. And this is why we become more susceptible to injury and things like that in joint. I knew when I first started when I was first menopausal, I blew my knee out. And at that time, I didn't realize that there was a connection there.
Right?
I
Most people
I ended
didn't.
ended up going for surgery. The whole idea of adhesive capsulitis, right? Frozen shoulder, all of that.
Yep.
So mobility, agility, strength, bone health, and then literally the muscles that produce is it an amino acid? Uh, that literally helps with neurotransmission. Um, there's uh, it's a fairly recent discovery that muscle actually produces using our muscles actually produces or helps with our brain health.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't think of it's a phytokine,
Could
right?
be.
Anyway, I'll have to look it up. But so doing what you like,
Mhm.
there's a question, there's a catch-22 for me,
Sure.
because we're all such victims of external messaging.
Okay.
And I mean, what I really like is to sit around and read a book. right?
Well, I meant what you like with exercise, I guess is what I meant. But yeah.
No, but yeah, but so, and I like, doing my yoga practice, but that, that is strength training in terms of my own body weight, and I can adapt it to make it more strength trainee. But that mindset of like trying to well, I'm supposed to like this. So even
Ah,
that
yes.
can be the catch 22.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
well, Brenda's been going to HIIT, and Beth's been going to boxing, and um
Yes. And I think this is why it's super important for us to be radically honest with ourselves.
okay, this is where I wanted to go with this. Thank you.
Yes, because you're so right, Lauren. There's so many different versions of exercise. This person's doing that, this person's doing this. And I think a lot of times what it comes down to is you got to try different things, see what you like, and then give yourself the permission to say, I love this, or I really don't like it, or it's kind of in the middle. It's really, yeah, really being honest with yourself and really saying, am I trying to fit myself into this box, or is this really who I am? And it's funny, sometimes we can be having that conversation with ourselves and not even, we can even be looking at it and not realizing we're doing it. You know what I mean? It's so funny
That's
that the
exactly
brain
my
is
point.
really like that.
It's
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So it's a very interesting thing. It is, yeah.
Yeah. So are there any like mile markers that you know of that you could offer here in terms of um because we're so used to giving ourselves false messaging or talking ourselves out of or into something because we're being told we should. Are there any mile markers like that when you're coaching somebody, um, you know, is there a common spidey sense that would say, um, yeah, no, it's time to try something new, or it's time to stick with it type thing?
Yeah. So as far as trying something new, I would say, does it feel heavy? Meaning, like, does it feel like you're being weighed down when it goes to do this? Or is there some kind of feeling of excitement or happiness around it? Because typically when something truly isn't a fit, it's going to be like, oh, I got to go do that. You know what I mean? And if something, and this is what I tell people too, where it can be a fit. You don't have to love a certain type of exercise. Like strength training, I like it, but I don't love it. But I do it because it's good for me, and I do it in a way that feels good for my body, right? But walking outside, I do love, especially when I'm around trees, right? I love that. The treadmill I like, okay, and I do it in the winter because I don't love walking outside in the winter. I'm freezing. So I kind of meet myself in the middle there, and I don't expect to love it. And that's what I teach my clients. Like, some of it you're not going to love, but you're going to like it. Okay. But the more you can find that you're going to love, great. But if you hate it and it feels like pulling teeth, that you got to move away from, because that's not going to be sustainable for you.
All right. So does it feel heavy?
Yeah. And there should be some kind of pleasure around it.
Right. Okay. Um, you had spoken, um, oh shoot, it just went out of my head. That's menopause.
I agree with men.
The idea of, it might seem rather basic, but could you go back to the idea of what is strength training?
Mhm.
Why is it important for bone health?
Yeah. So strength training, I mean, like you said, it can be body weight, right? It's any situation where we are putting stress on our muscle in a certain amount of reps, right? And the body has to respond. So what the body does with bone health, it feels that muscle pulling on the bone, right? So when it does that, that is what is making the bone cells lay down more bone to make that bone stronger. And that's how strength training actually helps improve bone density. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah. So in my research, which is, like you, I'm doing it almost every day now. Um, you know, a lot of us, particularly the smaller framed women like me,
Yeah.
um, you know, uh, it's sort of been accepted that osteopenia, osteoporosis is probably a foregone conclusion, and or you just need to take some sort of prescription, which I don't, really want to do, but the research that's coming out now, or that's being reintroduced, is that weight bearing exercise, strength training actually can stop and or reverse
Yeah, and I've seen it every-
osteopenia.
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it takes time. That's definitely not an overnight thing. You know, the clients I've seen it in, what happens is they strength train for a year or so, and they start seeing maintenance, and then they do another year, and then it starts to reverse. So it just, and that was like with 2 times a week. If you're doing a little bit more, you could actually make the process go a little bit faster. But yes, it's absolutely possible. But again, I would never tell somebody that as like, okay, just strength train and don't get a bone scan. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
definitely talk to your doctor, do the strength training, but also talk to your doctor. And if there needs to be other things brought in, you absolutely want to do that, because I would never want to tell somebody, oh, don't, especially with what they're saying now, with how helpful it is for women to get on estrogen, and even after they're already seeing those problems.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So-
Like, I can't, I don't want to push it on anybody in any of these groups, but I can't speak enough about replacing it.
Do you mind if I just speak to my personal experience about that real
Yes,
quick?
please. I
Yeah.
know, because you're,
I know.
you're 20 years younger than I am. Yeah,
Yeah,
please.
so I turned 40 in October. But
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you, right? Woo. Oh, my cat's trying to get on my lap. All right, we'll just leave you there. He likes to drool on me. But so I hit well, it felt early kind of, but it really wasn't. It just felt really extreme. So I hit 35, and because I'm so in tune with my body, I started feeling some different things, but nothing too crazy yet. But once I hit like 38, I mean, it was just like the sleep got so bad, brain fog, anxiety, the PMS, the fatigue. I had an IUD in my early 20s, and I've never been the same since with my energy levels. It really messed with me. And I think it might be my testosterone levels, because I came back low, may get on that eventually. I'm not sure yet. But I started a couple months ago on estrogen and progesterone cyclically, and I am doing so much better, just so much better. Energetically, I mean, I'm sleeping so much better. It's been a game changer for me. And yeah, I'm still 39, and it's been really extreme. It feels like what's such a young in myself too. I noticed before I got on the hormones that my resistance to stress, like my resistance to stress, to work, any kind of stress, whether it's coffee, whether it's work, whatever. I mean, anything would just deplete me. I
Right,
mean,
you don't drink coffee anymore, right?
no, I don't. I don't. But if I had a cup of coffee, I'd be fine that day. And then the next day I'd be on the couch all day. Like and I can have tea
That's
just fine.
sensitive.
Yeah, I can have tea just fine, but coffee, so it just got so bad where like I couldn't even work anywhere near as much as I wanted to. And I love what I do, but it was just like, it just couldn't handle any little thing. And then once I got on the hormones, it's like so much better, because if I did too much work, then I couldn't sleep at night because my nervous system and hormones are off and all that stuff is stimulated. And, so yeah.
Yeah, we really have to take care of our nervous system,
Mhm.
and not think that we're powerless to do that.
Right.
And one of the benefits of exercise is that it helps us to regulate our nervous system. So we're hitting, this serves multifactorial. This is multifactorially beneficial for us. So can you speak to, you know, from my understanding, it's nowadays, I mean, almost everybody's going to gain weight going through perimenopause and menopause, and have a shift of tissue in terms of more adipose tissue, more fat, and less muscle. So, but the wisdom or the research that's coming out now is saying that absolutely resistance training, strength training is almost should take precedence over cardiovascular.
Oh, yeah.
When we first start to gain that weight, we think, oh my God, I better start jogging because I just have to, it's calories in, calories out.
Yep. That's what we've been
So
taught,
can
right?
you speak to the balance of that? Because
Mhm.
I'm kind of leading the witness here, but you probably have more expert terminology around how do we balance that out? Should we emphasize cardio or should we emphasize strength training, and where's the balance for us,
Oh,
particularly if we are kind of behind the 8 ball in terms of weight gain?
so what I say about this is you want to look at strength training as definitely the long-term priority, right? Always try to make sure that's getting done. And if we're looking more the short term, okay, cardio maybe, but it's really that strength training, that extra muscle that is really going to work for us. Like it's like passive income, kind of that muscle that works for us. Like even when we're laying on the couch, our body is going to be more efficient at using food and burning calories and how it works, right? So that's what I would say is strength training is definitely the priority over cardio. Not that cardio and walking and those things aren't important. You want those too, but really if we're thinking long-term productivity, like that passive income type of mentality, it's really going to be the strength training for sure. Yeah. But if we're talking like daily calories, I mean, and we're trying to be in a deficit daily or a weekly, nothing crazy, nothing scary. And again, the deficit does it takes into account hormones, right? We're thinking about all that. We don't, because again, if you're in some crazy deficit, your body is going to be like, oh no, like
Yeah,
stop.
you're in stress mode. Yeah.
Yeah, stress mode, like start eating again, like all that stuff. So yes, strength training. And then if we're looking at trying to have that daily, weekly deficit, you want to make sure you have enough movement to achieve that, whatever that looks like for you. And actually, that's another thing we can talk about is people think that exercise is the most important thing when it comes to fat loss. It's actually food. Food is going to be the driver of that. Strength training massively helps over the long term, right? Creating that more metabolically efficient body. And then the other movement is really what just tops everything off. But nutrition is what really needs to be driving the bus. People think like, oh, it doesn't matter what I eat if I go run a bunch of miles or whatever. Been there, done that back in the day, because it's a recipe to get burnout and you're just a hamster on a wheel all the time. And you can only get so far with that approach.
Okay, so we need to throw away the idea that we can, if we're expending enough calories, that we can eat a whole bunch of simple carbohydrates and use those for fast energy burn, because what that will is exacerbate our predilection towards insulin resistance, which is part and parcel of our menopausal journey.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah, I would say.
Does that make sense to everybody?
And it's also not even just the insulin resistance. It's if somebody has a fat loss goal, it's just so much easier to eat a little bit less than it is to actually work that off through exercise. And that's a horrible mindset to be in anyways. Oh, I got to work off my food. I mean, going back to what Carrie was saying, that's like the perfect recipe for having, those
Exercise bulimia, is that what it's called?
absolutely, yes.
Yeah,
And that's
okay.
what I talk about with my clients too. I'm just like, the only time you're ever attaching your food and your exercise together is if you're thinking about fueling a workout, like scientifically fueling my workout. What am I doing? Am I going on a hike or something like that? What do I need fuel for? Not like, oh, I ate this food, I'm so bad, I gotta go run it off. Like none of that. None of that.
None of that. So
Yeah.
that's the mindset shift.
So this is another
So many. Go ahead.
super simple question, because I love how you described how strength training works for bones, like
Yeah.
insulin resistance. I think something I'm sure I heard it. I never paid attention to until a few years ago, and haven't really bothered to research it. Like, could you give us the 101 on what that means and why we're hearing that so much?
Yeah. So insulin resistance itself is when the muscle cells are not sensitive to bringing the sugar from the bloodstream into the muscles. Okay, so those cells that sit on the muscle tissue become less sensitive to bringing that blood sugar in. Okay, so what happens is we have more sugar hanging out in the bloodstream then. So, and then a lot of times that ends up going to the fat stores, because if it's not going into the muscles to be used, it has to go somewhere, right? So that's why insulin resistance, talking about that, is important, and increasing our insulin sensitivity through strength training. And even going for a walk, it temporarily helps because it gets that sugar out of the blood and into the muscles because it's working right there. But again, if we're talking about that like passive income of strength training, that is going to help with that. And then of course, our nutritional habits impact our insulin resistance as well, as far as what am I choosing to live on as far as foods? Am I watching this? Am I having starches with fiber, right? The fiber comes back to that we were talking with Lauren, like that's so key for having our meals and our food break down slower and having that different effect. And as far as insulin resistance goes with perimenopause, the reason for that is those hormonal changes, right? But we are not at the mercy of that necessarily. We can do these lifestyle factors that massively improve that. Does that make sense? Okay, perfect.
So the lifestyle factors are mental as well as just your actions. It's your thoughts around it,
Yeah.
which are going to help to determine your behavior and help you to do the right thing, right?
Or
With
going to
the
be
right attitude.
beneficial for you at that moment in time, right? Or wherever you're trying to go. It is the mind, the brain that controls the habits. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why yeah, just talking about mindset and really looking at the psychology behind that stuff is super duper important.
Mm-hmm. So do you have, in terms of this, this is something I've never heard before, so I'm happy to hear it, emotional neutrality around food.
Yeah.
And not labeling, in that dichotomy, good and bad. We're so into being non-binary right now in every level, right? It's kind of lovely. So again, do you have any little hacks for someone who's not ever been in the habit of emotional neutrality around food, that is always a triggering event or often is? Are there any kind of hacks when you're deciding what to eat, or you have anticipatory anxiety about what to eat? What
So the
might you
biggest,
tell a client?
yeah, so the biggest thing I tell people is this is a practice. It is absolutely a practice. And how you learn how to get better is by messing up, right? So just expect that that's going to happen, and being like really tuning in and looking at what's going on. Like, am I feeling shame around this food? What did I overeat because I was feeling shameful, or what? Really give yourself the permission to look at what's happening and let yourself mess up too, and really accept that this takes time. Like really developing a different relationship with food, especially if we come from that background of those extreme behaviors with eating and exercise. It takes time, because we are really rewiring our brain over time. And give yourself that permission to let this take its course, have it be a practice, and let yourself just understand you're going to mess up, and that's how you learn. That's really what I tell people.
Okay. So it would probably behoove people, if they were interested in this, not to make it something that's another to do, but to reflect or even to journal. Or
Sure.
do you not recommend that?
It's so funny because everybody is so different. And I recommend that people, if somebody feels drawn to journaling, then journal. If the journaling gives you anxiety, then that's your answer. Journal isn't for you. It's so funny. When I just started my new online thing, I had people come, like 2 of the women came to me and they're like, oh, you're not going to make us journal, right? And they're like, I'm not. Come on, you know me. So, but I have people that love it and they find it super helpful. So yeah, it just really depends on the person.
Yeah, because sometimes that learning, sometimes we want to just, put that emotion of having made a mistake in a closet and not actually look at it, not consider it
And
something that,
that's shame. That's what the shame is making us want to do, right? Oh my gosh, I can't look at that because then I'd be a bad person and I'm not good enough. And it's like, no, you're human. Bring that into the light, like Brene would say. Bring it into the light.
right.
You humanize it, because that's how you destroy that shame, is humanizing what is going on, truly. Because really, when we are putting ourselves in this place of, oh my gosh, I'm not good enough for this or that, that is what is allowing the shame to thrive. And then that is what is controlling our behaviors.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. And it's really a one-way street. And this leads into, we're not going to address it tonight, but just to tease folks, this leads into that whole idea of self-image, intimacy,
Yeah. Yeah.
sensuality, sexuality,
My
you know,
gosh.
you know, I know for me, if I ate too much of a big dinner, there ain't gonna be no happy time in the bed because I'm like, it's not like, oh, I feel gross, but it's like kind of, you know. Um,
Yes, sometimes there can be like the body image piece, and then sometimes you just feel uncomfortable, like physically.
right,
Yeah.
right. So, but it's hard to separate that sometimes,
Separate.
particularly if you've had a dysfunctional relationship.
Sure. Sure.
So I think this is really helpful to just sort of pause here for a second and just take in what Ashley said around, I'm only human. This is an experiment. Shame has no place in my life. Um, I'm going to hit the reset button right now because this is what I've learned.
Yeah, and really learning how to transcend shame, because even like Brene says, you can't get rid of shame. You just learn how to get better at making your way through it. Constructively making our way through it is what she says. So it doesn't tear us down like it would before we learned how to do that. Right.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. Okay. Yeah. So for the second session of this course, we talked about it was entitled Nourish, and it was about nutrition and how thoughts are nutrition and nourishment just as much as. So it is a complicated relationship, and it's a complicated dialogue. So it's good to have these resources and these concepts out there that you can explore and experiment with, because I know that there's part of us, there's a voice inside of us says, well, I'm on the slippery slope anyway. I'm on the downhill slope, so who cares?
No all or nothing thinking. There it is. Yep. And that is a big thing that we work with too, is really noticing, being mindful of when our mind is going into that place, because it's such a human thing for the brain to do, is this all or nothing, this 180. It's like, oh, well, if it's not this, then it's got to be all the way over here. You know what I mean? But really, there's the reality of it is there's so many different options in between those two things, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just writing down no more all or nothing mindset.
Or, we're just being mindful of it and learning how to transcend it, like practice working your way through it. Because I feel like, again, when we tell ourselves, oh, well, I can't do that, what's our brain going to want to do? Well, it's going to want to do that. So it's more of like, yeah, just transcending it, being mindful of it, and learning how to work through it and choose something different. Always something instead of all or nothing. If I guess we're talking about exercise, so it kind of just depends on what we're talking about. But
Okay. Yeah, but this dovetails really well with the overriding topic of this. Yeah, just one sec, Karine. The overriding topic of spirituality.
it does.
It's like,
Mhm.
if you think you're doing it all by yourself and you have no allies, think again.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm gonna go back to something you talked about. You mentioned it a couple times, just to make sure everybody's clear and I'm clear. You're talking about, if you do want to lose fat, you need to absolutely consider going into calorie deficit on a daily or a weekly basis. So that there is that formula of, well, we don't want to be too hyper focused. If we, for any number of good reasons, want to lose weight, lose fat, should we be counting calories
I
and
would.
looking at charts? Because you were talking about calorie deficit, which,
Right. So how do you achieve that without knowing how many calories you're eating, right?
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So first of all, I like people knowing a general idea of portion sizes, calories, but really it's more the habits that you're engaging in and watching if that combination of habits is bringing you into a deficit to where you're seeing fat loss. If you're not, what do we need to adjust? Where do we need to tweak things, right? It's not this thing that we have to count, really. It's like when we are being mindful of how much we're bringing in our body, if we're moving regularly, we should start to see some things. And if we're not, we just got to see where things need to be tweaked. And that's going to depend on where somebody is. The more body fat a person has, the less specific they need to be. And as we lose body fat, then maybe the more specific that we need to be with things. And again, we don't need to count. It's more of a feeling. You will eventually, when you allow yourself to tune into your body and you see kind of what's producing fat loss, where you're in a deficit, you're going to know what a deficit feels like. And you don't want it to be some extreme deficit. What I tell people is before you go to bed, you want to be like, I'd like to eat. I definitely would like to. I could, but I don't need to. Okay. We shouldn't be in a place of I need to eat. Right. But even again, some people may not even need to be there. You may just need to really, the biggest thing is watching how much we're eating, like at meals, right? Like the amount, making sure we're getting enough movement. And then also quality, but it goes back to that thing I was saying a second ago. It is going to be different for somebody depending on where they are, how much body fat we have, right? Yeah, and you're going to see that's why people get afraid of plateaus. Oh, I'm plateauing. It's not really a plateau. It's just,
Oh, yeah.
things just need to be tweaked as you go further along, if that makes sense, because of where you're in maintenance now. That's just what happens. Those habits that got you from, say, a certain weight to something lower, okay, now you're in maintenance. If you're not seeing any more change in something, it just needs to be tweaked a little bit. It doesn't mean like, oh my gosh, I'm in this plateau, my body's broken, I need to do something really extreme. No, just whatever little next thing you want to try and getting that train moving again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a tremendous amount of sense because there's so much emphasis out in the, in the world on even, Weight Watchers, which is perennially popular. And now they're doing this point system,
Let's talk a little bit. So I'll just say for anybody or any system, anything, the way that you got there is what you're going to have to do forever to stay there. So if you love to count before you eat, have at it. I don't want to sit down and count a whole bunch of things before I eat, right? So they can label it whatever they want. You're counting calories, you're counting points, you're counting macros, you're counting this, you're counting that. It's still that counting situation. They just put a new dress on it. It's the same thing, really.
Okay.
But I do think, though, their newer system versus what we had like 15, 20 years ago does take into account like the different types of foods and kind of how that affects certain things, but maybe not to the level that it's needs to be educated on, in my opinion. But
Well, like you're saying, is one of the keys to sort of having a successful relationship with your temple, with your body, is intuitive eating. And something like Weight Watchers is the antithesis to intuitive eating, because it's an external measure. And I saw that not too many weeks ago, my boyfriend's sister and her mother, they're both on Weight Watchers, but because it was like a celebratory weekend, they just went nuts. And
Right.
they had what do you call it? Espresso martinis and the desserts and the white sauce and the this and the that. And I was like, not in a judgy place, but I was observing and I was like, so either you're on it
Yep, you're
or
on or
you're
off. You're
off
on
it.
the wagon or you're off. And that's again, the issue is that these diets, but before I get into that, I want to say, I don't ever tell somebody what they should or should not do. People are able to make their own decision and empower them. And maybe for some reason in their journey, maybe that makes sense for them right at that moment. I don't know. It's not my place. But what I will say is, yeah, it is this, you're on the wagon, you're off the wagon. It's not teaching people how to live in real life, right? Like, and we have cheat days and this and that. It's like, oh, on the weekends it's different than during the week. And it's again, it comes back to, I think what Carrie said, the food rules. It's like, oh, I can eat like this during the week, and on the weekend I'm free. And then, but then I go crazy and I undo everything I did during the week. Yeah, there's so much of that.
Yeah. And I don't think that that's really sustainable or ultimately empowering.
No, I don't either.
And, going back to what we talked about in the second session, food can be medicine.
Sure is.
Medicine,
It is
medicine can be food, so I know Carrie Kay, and she and I both, we have restrictions around what we can eat. But for me, it doesn't mean that I don't enjoy my food every day. There's
Yeah.
just I just I just I just am disciplined about what I know to be toxic to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's another good point too. We talked about with exercise. Don't do things you hate. Don't eat food you hate either. Because somebody said it's healthy and I gotta eat that. No, you don't. Nope. If you
Yeah, you don't like, I don't like chia seeds. Some people
yeah,
don't like chia
yeah.
seeds
Or
or
what's that
whatever.
kombucha?
I like chia, but yeah.
I hate kombucha. I'm like, or any fermented stuff. I just, other than like sourdough bread, but
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, there you go. So, but that's how you develop the healthy relationship. That's how you can walk through your temple in a way where your head can be held high. And I think we keep coming back to this shame thing.
mhm.
And we cannot keep opening that package that keeps showing up at our door. We need to stop that.
Yep.
Just
Yeah, and
because,
just recognize that it's happening and that you have other options. I feel like sometimes that's where people get hung up, is that they just think, oh, well, their brain is like, this is what I should do. And they don't see the options outside of it that actually are there, you know? Yeah.
yeah, but it's a matter of loving ourselves, educating ourselves, having conversations like this. I mean, I would consider myself pretty knowledgeable about this topic, but you just like blew it out of the water for me. So
Oh,
the conversation is so, so, so very important, and the community is so important. So, we are at time, and I just want to, just thank Ashley so much for bringing her wisdom and her enthusiasm and her expertise to this topic. And, this is a partnership that I think we're going to continue to the best of our abilities as far as what our availability is. But again, I just thank you so much, and I hope that everyone here, and we have one person who will be watching the recording. So I'm just hoping everybody feels a little bit more in the driver's seat, enthusiastic, and can really put walk the walk now a little bit more. So yeah, thank you again, Ashley. And I'll make sure that Ashley also has a website and everything. She's got programs. So make sure that you get that when you get your recap email.